Journey Through Time welcomes you to another immersive exploration of our planet's forgotten ages. A place where you can dim the lights, slow your breathing, and drift into an era stranger than any dream. Tonight, we are setting out on a journey more than 300 million years into the past, to an age older than the dinosaurs and far more alien than most people imagine, the Carboniferous period. It was a time when the air itself was richer, heavier, and more oxygen-laden than today, nearly 35% compared to our modern 21%. That single difference changed everything about life on land. Instead of the familiar insects and damp undergrowth we know now, the Carboniferous forests were vast swamps, filled with towering club mosses and giant tree ferns that blocked out the sun. Under this dense canopy, a strange world thrived, humid, warm, and alive, with colossal creatures whose size defied the limits of our imagination. Spiders built webs across entire tree trunks. Scorpions grew as large as household pets. Millipedes stretched longer than a human body, and dragonflies with wings wider than a hawk glided above the canopy, their beating wings echoing like a living machine in the misty air. This was not the age of towering reptiles or mammalian hunters, but of arthropods, creatures whose jointed legs and armored exoskeletons made them the apex predators of their time. The oceans, surprisingly, were safer than the land. In this strange inversion of our assumptions, the ground was far more dangerous than the water. Here, oxygen created monsters. Each breath of that air supercharged metabolism, fueling bodies that could grow beyond what modern physiology would allow. As you close your eyes and listen to this story, picture the Earth as it was then. Endless swamps shimmering with moisture, air thick and warm like a greenhouse, and every surface alive with movement. The Carboniferous was not a quiet chapter in the planet's history. It was a living crucible of fire, life, and constant evolution, a stage where survival meant confronting creatures so alien and so immense that even dinosaurs would later seem familiar by comparison. Step beyond the opening curtain of time and let the scene sharpen. The Carboniferous landscape stretches endlessly before you, a mosaic of dark swamps, towering vegetation, and mist-soaked air. Breathing here would feel heavy and almost intoxicating. Each inhale carries a charge, like a strange surge of vitality mixed with danger. Sunlight filters weakly through a ceiling of giant fronds, painting the ground in a patchwork of pale green and shadowed black. Underfoot, the earth is soft, layered with centuries of fallen plant matter. Every step sinks slightly, as if the planet itself resists your intrusion. These forests were not like any woodland we know. Instead of oaks and pines, vast groves of club mosses, lepidodendrons, rose like organic columns, their bark scaly and ridged, their crowns spreading into fern-like plumes. Some exceeded 100 feet in height, their roots knitting into sprawling networks beneath the surface, locking the swamp into a living lattice. Between them stood equally massive horsetail plants and tree ferns, their feathered fronds arching overhead in overlapping canopies. Together they created a living labyrinth so dense that visibility dropped to only a few meters at best. In this dim and claustrophobic world, life had seized upon opportunity. The very abundance of oxygen turned the forest floor into a theater of gigantism. Arthropods, insects, millipedes, scorpions, and spiders became the dominant engineers of the ecosystem. Where today's insects are small, fragile, and often unnoticed, their ancestors here were titans. Each one pushed the limits of its anatomy, evolving longer limbs, broader wings, and thicker armor. Imagine kneeling at the edge of a murky pool as a millipede thicker than your arm and longer than your body glides past like a living conveyor of chitinous plates. Hear the scrape of its hundreds of legs moving in eerie coordination, a rasping sound that echoes across the water's edge. This creature, Arthropleura, was the largest terrestrial arthropod ever to live, more than 8 feet long in some cases, its segmented body gleaming like wet bronze in the dim light. Though likely a detritivore feeding on decaying plant matter, its sheer size and alien presence would have been terrifying to any vertebrate struggling to survive on land. Nearby, a scorpion as large as a house cat lurks beneath a fallen tree trunk. Its pincers open and close with audible clicks, testing the air, while its long, arched tail trembles with venomous potential. This is no desert scorpion, but a swamp hunter, armored for ambush. For an early amphibian creeping from the water's edge, one wrong move could mean being seized and stung, venom flooding its primitive circulatory system in seconds. Above, the sky is not empty. Meganeura, a dragonfly the size of a hawk, patrols the air with deliberate mechanical wing beats. Its compound eyes, each a mosaic of thousands of lenses, scan for movement far below. A frog-sized amphibian, or even a small lizard-like reptile, could find itself lifted off the ground in a spiny basket of legs and devoured mid-flight. In this atmosphere, flight is not delicate, but predatory, a weapon sharpened by oxygen-rich air. Every niche in this ecosystem is claimed. Plants entangle the swamp edges, weaving thick mats that trap silt and water. Fungi thread the decomposing layers beneath, breaking down fallen fronds into fertile muck. Insects crawl across every trunk and leaf, carving tunnels, sipping sap, or laying eggs in hidden crevices. Nothing is empty. Even the smallest spaces carry the sense of life pressing outward, as though the entire landscape breathes in unison. And with life comes fire. Oxygen, that invisible enabler, is also fuel. In a world so saturated, one lightning strike can turn the swamps into walls of flame. Firestorms rip across the canopy, igniting even damp wood and wet moss, consuming everything in a roar hotter and faster than modern fires. The Carboniferous is a paradox, a damp jungle that burns like tinder. Survival here demands constant vigilance, not only against predators, but against the very atmosphere. Now picture yourself as an early vertebrate, slick-skinned and awkward, venturing onto land in search of food. You climb over roots as thick as your torso, pushing aside leaves taller than you are. The air clings to you like a wet cloth. Every sound, a scrape, a buzz, a thrum of wings, could be a predator. You press your body low to the ground, hoping to vanish into shadow. But the smell of your skin's moisture draws hidden hunters. Your lungs ache with the strange richness of oxygen. Your nerves tremble at each vibration underfoot. This is not just exploration. It is a gamble for survival, in a place where everything around you has evolved to exploit the same space, the same air, the same relentless opportunity. In the Carboniferous, nothing stands still. Life is a constant arms race, each adaptation countered by another, each advantage temporary. To be here is to feel the pressure of evolution at its rawest. No safe niches, no quiet corners, only the endless press of organisms testing and retesting the limits of their bodies. In this alien age, land is not a sanctuary. It is a crucible. Move deeper into the Carboniferous night, and the full scale of its strangeness reveals itself. The forest no longer feels like a place of trees and undergrowth, but like a living machine, endlessly shifting, buzzing, and breathing. The air is heavy with the smell of rot, sweet and metallic at once, as if the planet itself exhales decay. Water trickles through mats of fallen fronds, pooling into slow, dark channels where amphibians lurk, with only their eyes breaking the surface. Every inch of this landscape tells a story of excess, of plants growing taller than their modern descendants, of insects surpassing the limits of size, of oxygen fueling an arms race between predator and prey. Here, arthropods dominate not just by size, but by sheer abundance. Unlike the dinosaurs that will one day thunder across open plains, these creatures are intimate, near, and unavoidable. They scuttle under your hands, crawl above your head, and glide silently past your ear. The dominance of insects has turned the Carboniferous into an inversion of our usual fears. Not a few great predators, but a swarm of rulers that fills every niche. On the forest floor, Arthropleura is not alone. Smaller millipede relatives, armored like scaled chains, curl and uncurl as they feed on rotting vegetation. Their exoskeletons glint under drops of condensation, a moving mosaic of plates and joints. Scorpions stalk between roots, their tails twitching with restrained venom. Some species climb trees to reach prey, trapped in the webs of giant spiders, while others dig burrows to ambush anything soft-bodied enough to crush. The spiders themselves are architects of terror. In this world of perpetual dampness, their silk stretches across entire corridors between ferns. Threads glisten in the dim light like silver tripwires. A small amphibian trying to push through might not even see the strands until they catch on its limbs. Within seconds, vibrations signal the spider hidden nearby, and it lunges, a mass of jointed legs and glistening fangs, large enough to pin its victim and inject venom. The webs are not delicate ornaments, but hunting structures strong enough to hold vertebrate prey. Above, Meganeura patrols the skies like a living fighter jet. Fossils reveal its 3-foot wingspan, but fossils cannot capture the sound, a deep thrumming buzz like fabric tearing under tension. That noise vibrates through the canopy, warning everything below that the hunter is near. The dragonfly's compound eyes grant near 360-degree vision, turning any movement into a target. Once locked on, its spiny legs snap together like a cage, trapping creatures mid-air and carrying them back to a perch to devour. Even amphibians daring to leap between pools risk being snatched before they land. This layered predation means no refuge. On the ground, centipedes and scorpions. In the canopy, spiders. In the air, dragonflies. Even the smallest pools are lined with predatory fish and early sharks. To exist here is to exist between teeth, claws, and silk. It is a world that demands constant awareness. The sensory overload shapes behavior. Amphibians cling close to the water's edge, bodies pressed low, skin glistening with moisture to avoid drying out. They move in bursts, darting from cover to cover, relying on stillness more than speed. Silence becomes a weapon, but also a warning. In the Carboniferous, sudden silence often means something large is approaching. The forest itself amplifies fear. Its towering plants create corridors of shadow, where every sound echoes. The rustle of leaves may not be wind, but the legs of a predator scraping past. The smell of decay masks the scent of approaching danger until it is too late. Even the humidity carries vibrations, turning the air into a conductor of sound. Above all, it is the scale of the creatures that unnerves. We look at insects today and think of them as minor. But imagine a spider the size of a dinner plate crouched above you, or a scorpion longer than your arm stalking across the leaf litter. Imagine a millipede as thick as your torso curling between tree roots, its hundreds of legs moving in perfect sync. These were not background organisms. They were apex forces of the ecosystem, and vertebrates were the interlopers. Fires add to the chaos. When storms roll in, lightning ignites the canopy, and the forest becomes a furnace. Oxygen-rich air feeds flames hotter and faster than anything we know today. Creatures scatter in panic, diving into water or burrowing deep, but many are caught in the inferno. Afterward, charred trunks stand like blackened pillars over smoldering peat, and within days, new growth begins again. This cycle of destruction and regrowth feeds yet another layer of danger. Open ground where predators can see farther and strike faster. Yet even in this nightmare, life adapts. Amphibians develop stronger limbs to crawl farther from water, tougher skin to hold moisture longer, and stealthier behaviors to evade detection. Some reptiles begin to emerge, their scaly bodies better suited to dryness, their eggs freed from water's edge. But these are small shifts in a landscape still ruled by monsters. To walk in the Carboniferous is to walk through living history. Not the clean skeletons in a museum, but the full, humid, pulsing reality of an age when insects became kings. Every step presses into soft, rotting soil. Every breath carries the scent of vegetation and decay. Every sound may be the last thing you hear before a shadow falls from above or a web tightens around your limbs. This is not merely prehistory. This is Earth at its most alien, testing the limits of life. The deeper you move into this Carboniferous realm, the clearer it becomes that land itself is not a place of safety, but a living battlefield. Everything about this environment conspires to test the creatures who enter it. The ground is not solid, but a wet quilt of decaying plant matter, sagging under each step. Roots twist like knotted ropes beneath your feet, and pockets of methane bubble from the muck, releasing the sour smell of trapped gases. Overhead, the sky is a dim green-gray, filtered through layers of fern fronds, creating a twilight even at midday. This darkness is not empty. It is filled with watchers. To survive here as an early amphibian or reptile is to live with your senses stretched to breaking. You press your belly low to the damp ground to hide your silhouette from aerial hunters. Your eyes flick constantly to the canopy for the flash of translucent wings. Your skin, so carefully kept moist, tingles at every vibration traveling through the soil. The act of breathing, filling your lungs with the thick oxygen, brings a strange lightheadedness, a paradoxical mix of energy and unease. This is not the crisp air of a modern forest. This is an atmosphere that supercharges your blood, even as it threatens to poison you. Around you, the creatures of the Carboniferous move like alien machines. Arthropleura, the giant millipede, drags its segmented bulk over moss-covered logs, hundreds of armored legs scraping in hypnotic rhythm. Its scent trails linger in the dampness, musky, earthy, and unsettling. The spiders spin new traps daily, some dangling from branches like living pendulums, others crouched inside silk-lined burrows, waiting to spring. Their webs catch not only insects, but small vertebrates too, and the forest echoes with muffled struggles, followed by stillness. Scorpions patrol the open corridors between plant trunks. Their armor gleams wetly, pincers flexing with quiet menace. Some have developed the ability to climb, scaling the ridged bark of giant club mosses to ambush prey from above. Others bury themselves in soft peat, striking upward when vibrations betray a passing amphibian. Their venom, potent in this oxygen-rich world, acts almost instantly, paralyzing and suffocating victims before they can struggle. In the air, Meganeura never stops. It circles slowly, its vast wings moving with a deep, relentless hum that reverberates through the swamp like a distant drum. Its multifaceted eyes register even the smallest flicker of motion. If you lift your head, if you twitch your limb, It knows. The dragonfly's spiny legs form a cage mid-air, and its serrated jaws can shear through soft tissue in seconds. Flight here is not escape. Flight is ambush from above. The psychological pressure of this world would be immense. Silence is a trap. Noise is a warning. Movement invites death, but stillness invites discovery. Every strategy is double-edged. The humid air amplifies smells and vibrations, erasing the boundary between predator and prey. There is no safety except in constant vigilance, and even that is temporary. Fire adds another unpredictable layer. Storm clouds gather without warning, releasing lightning that ignites the canopy. Flames surge upward with explosive force, fueled by oxygen-rich air. Even the dampest fronds burn, and thick smoke rolls low across the forest floor. Creatures stampede toward water or dig frantically into the mud. For amphibians, the swamp offers a temporary refuge, but the heat and falling embers make survival uncertain. In minutes, an entire section of forest can transform into a furnace of crackling trunks and shrieking animals. Yet adaptation continues. Amphibians refine their limbs and lungs. Small reptiles slip quietly through the underbrush, their scaly skins holding precious moisture, their claws gripping the slick surfaces of fallen logs. They begin to venture farther from water, testing new territories that arthropods have ruled unchallenged for millions of years. Their eggs, sealed in self-contained capsules, free them from ponds and puddles. This small innovation opens the first cracks in the arthropod empire. But the arthropods are not passive. They too adapt. Spiders develop faster venom and more elaborate webs. Dragonflies hone their aerial agility, making sharper dives and swifter escapes. Scorpions grow thicker armor and refine their ambush tactics. It is an arms race with no pause button. Each new trait met with a counter, each counter answered with escalation. Imagine standing on a mossy rise, looking out over the swamp at dusk. Mist coils between the towering trunks, catching the fading light like ghostly ribbons. Beneath the surface of a shallow pool, amphibians hide among plant roots, their bulbous eyes just above the waterline. A scorpion slips across the mud, its shadow stretching long and thin. Above, the droning wingbeat of Meganura builds like distant thunder. A spider web sways slightly between two trunks, trembling with the movement of something caught. This is the soundtrack of life here, a tension that never breaks, a hum of survival woven into the very air. The emotional memory of this environment has echoed through millions of years. We still flinch at the tickle of a spider's thread on our skin. We still tense at the buzz of wings near our ears. These instincts were not born in our modern world, but forged in ages like this, where every small movement might spell doom. Fear itself became a survival tool, etched into nervous systems that learned to anticipate predators before they struck. As the Carboniferous presses on, its creatures grow, shift, and push boundaries. But already subtle changes in climate and atmosphere are brewing. Shifts that will one day topple this oxygen-driven kingdom and shrink its monsters. For now, though, the swamps remain a crucible of excess. Life stretches to the very edge of possibility, and the land, more than the oceans, is the arena where evolution's most extravagant experiments play out. Slip beneath the surface and the world changes. The same swamp that above felt like a maze of claws, silk, and armored legs becomes, underwater, a chamber of muffled sounds and measured movements. Mud swallows the thud of footsteps. The roar of fire becomes a distant liquid hiss. For the first vertebrates testing their luck on land, this return to water was not just retreat, it was strategy. A calculated dive into physics that favored them. In air, oxygen-supercharged arthropods, pushing their tracheal plumbing to improbable limits, and inflating bodies into living siege engines. In water, that advantage collapsed. Diffusion slows. Buoyancy alters how weight is borne. The giant millipede that could heave itself like a moving log across the forest floor could not translate that mass into similar dominance below the surface. Here, strength belonged to different designs: streamlined bodies, flexible tails, gill arches and lungs working in tandem, muscles optimized for thrust rather than lift. The monsters of land shrank in meaning underwater. Picture a shallow pool along the edge of a peat-choked channel. In the dim light, small fish flash, like quick seams of metal, between stalks of horsetail. A juvenile amphibian hovers, with just its nostrils breaking the film, ribs heaving slowly, throat pulsing. The surface reflects a jittering mirror of the forest, ferns, trunks, the quick shadow of a circling dragonfly that cannot pierce the water to seize what it sees. The amphibian's eyes watch that shadow, but the threat never breaks the boundary. Here, the rules of attack are different, and for once, they favor the soft-bodied newcomer. Predators exist in these waters, of course. Early sharks slicing the deeper channels, lungfish rooting through silt, armored fish with plates like stacked shingles. But the scale of terror is bounded. There is no millipede the length of a man uncoiling through the shallows, no cat-sized scorpion dragging its sting like a drawn spear. The physics of breathing curbs excess. Gills and primitive lungs impose ceilings that oxygen-rich air ignored on land. In the hierarchy of danger, the water is not kind, but it is comprehensible. A place where a small vertebrate may be hunted, yet not overwhelmed on all fronts at once. Movement itself becomes a kind of grace below the surface. What is clumsy on land, a body dragging chest first over slick roots, becomes purposeful in water. A flick of the tail, a controlled scull of limbs, a glide into vegetation where the body dissolves into shadow and silt. The swamp is textured here, layered with refugees. Roots form lattices, fallen trunks hollow into tunnels. Leaf mats collapse into caves of woven stems. Amphibians learn those spaces like cartographers of concealment, memorizing the negative geography of safety. The niches predators cannot quite enter, the pockets where a single breath can be taken unseen. Even sound conspires to help. Above, the Carboniferous is a siren of noise, the heavy thrumming of meganeura, the rasp of 100 legs on bark, the brittle click of pincers. Below, the swamp narrows the bandwidth. Vibrations carry, yes, but in ways that can be read, sorted, anticipated. A quick ripple means a small fish. A long, low pulse means something heavier. The water translates danger into patterns, and patterns become tactics. Freeze when the long pulse nears, bolt when it begins to fade, bury when it stops. Survival in water becomes a code of timing. Fire, that other tyrant of the age, is simplest here. When the canopy ignites and the air brightens to an inferno, the water turns the apocalypse into endurance. Ash will fall, heat will press down, oxygen will feed red tongues across the surface. But deeper in the channel, cool layers hold. Amphibians crowd those layers, lungs idling, skins drinking the world's last calm pocket, bodies aligned along the bottom as the storm passes the only way a storm can. Forward, then away. It is tempting to romanticize this refuge, to call the water a sanctuary and leave the story there. But the Carboniferous never offers perfect safety. Refuge here is conditional and crowded. When fires pass, predators concentrate along the renewed channels, exploiting the choke points life has chosen. When storms churn the swamp, silt clouds visibility and force creatures into the open. Even the miracle of buoyancy can betray. A sudden drop in oxygen, a surge of rotting matter, a bloom of decay can turn a pool from shelter to trap overnight. Safety in this age is always an interval, a borrowed hour, not a purchase. Yet the intervals matter. They are long enough for change to accumulate. In those quiet pockets, skin thickens almost imperceptibly across generations. Limbs knit stronger joints. Lungs partition into chambers better suited to gulping air without collapse. Eyes learn to toggle between refraction and reflection. Below to above, murk to mist. The amphibians' bodies, once entirely married to water, begin drafting a prenuptial with land. We will return, they say, but on our terms. On the banks, the first small reptiles read the same ledger and draw a bolder conclusion. They do not depend on these intervals. Their scales hold moisture where air wicks it away. Their eggs travel with them, sealed universes of yolk and membrane that do not require ponds as cradles. While amphibians stage amphibious raids on opportunity, reptiles begin the slow, quiet colonization of risk. They hunt along the fringes of the old empire, in leaf litter left black by fire, on drier shoulders of ground, between meandering channels, beneath the laddered roots of toppled club mosses, where insects cluster to feed. In the arithmetic of survival, leaving water stops being a gamble and starts being an investment that pays, slowly at first, then widely. Meanwhile, the arthropod rulers continue to press advantage where it is still absolute. Spiders retune webs to humidity cycles, laying traps where evaporation shrinks, the strands tautest at dawn. Scorpions split strategy. Some bulk into living anvils of chitin. Others slim down to become climbers, exporting the threat vertically. Meganeura sharpens the boundary between safety and doom with speed, crossing the distance from canopy to prey before a heartbeat completes. The empire is not complacent, it is innovative. But innovation has costs. Each step toward specialization tightens the knot that ties their fortunes to a supercharged atmosphere and swamp-bound forests. At night, the contrast between worlds feels clearest. Above the surface, fear is granular and everywhere. The brush of silk across your face, the sudden hush that says something large has paused nearby, the buzzing arc of a hunter you cannot outpace. Below, fear moves in waves, predictable, chartable, a pattern that a brain can learn to ride. One world demands panic. The other offers the possibility of strategy. Life evolves toward strategies. So the water keeps its role through this long chapter. Not escape, not peace, but a solvable problem. In that solvable problem, vertebrates practice being land animals without being consumed by land's chaos. They rehearse lungs for air, while lungs are not yet a sentence. They practice walking by swimming shallow, practicing limb timing against drag. They test appetite on beetle larvae that stray into the shallows and snatch flies that skim too low. Every success buys time. Every failure is absorbed by a medium that forgives more than it punishes. If you listen closely, past the thrum above and the rasp along the bark, you can hear the hinge of history swing on these pools and channels. The future rulers of land are not born in triumphant marches across open ground. They are minted here, in the dark water under fallen fronds, where a small vertebrate learns that terror can be managed when physics is on your side. When it finally steps out again, it will carry that lesson with it. Find the intervals, read the patterns, turn the world's rules into your tools. For now, the Carboniferous keeps its balance. Land as a gauntlet, water as a chessboard. But balances fail. Already, subtle shifts begin to move through the canopy and the sky. Changes in breath itself, in the air's recipe, in the reach of the swamps. The empire of oxygen has written its monsters. Soon, it will begin to edit them. Even in an age that feels eternal, shifts begin quietly. Deep under the swamp floor, layers of plant matter compress into peat, peat into coal, and with that slow burial carbon is locked away. The air that once surged with oxygen and damp green exhalations begins to change its recipe. Temperatures slip, seasons wobble. The endless swamps that fueled monstrous arthropods start to falter at their edges, drying into patches of brittle vegetation. It is imperceptible in a single lifetime, but across thousands of generations, it is revolution. For the giant arthropods, the invisible shift is deadly. Their bodies are built on a bet that oxygen will always be plentiful enough to flood their tracheal tubes, enough to nourish every limb, enough to feed their unrelenting muscles. But as oxygen levels decline from their dizzying highs towards something closer to our modern 21%, the bet starts to fail. Size becomes liability. The same diffusion that once sustained their bulk now starves it. The monsters of the forest floor and canopy discover a hard limit written into their biology. Picture a forest corridor, once patrolled by Arthropleura. Its segmented body, once gleaming like black copper, now moves sluggishly. Fewer offspring reach maturity. Those that do are smaller, lighter, more vulnerable. The once imposing millipede begins to leave thinner trails across the peat. Fossil evidence millions of years later will show a tapering footprint, the signature of gigantism collapsing in real time. Above, Meganeura's descendants begin to shrink. Wings that spanned nearly a meter fold down to more modest arcs. Vision still panoramic, reflexes still sharp, but energy wanes. Air no longer provides the same lift, the same fuel. A dragonfly once capable of patrolling an entire stretch of swamp now hovers only over a single glade. Apex predators of the sky cede territory without realizing it. On the ground, scorpions and spiders feel the pinch. Their venom is still potent, their armor still thick, but the balance tilts. Prey that once trembled before them multiplies in new forms. Small reptiles, newly hatched from amniotic eggs, press deeper into the undergrowth. Their jaws strengthen. Their claws grip better. Their skins resist drying. Their lungs work efficiently, even as the air thins. They hunt back. This is not an overnight coup. It is a slow shift of margins. At first, arthropods dominate almost everywhere, and reptiles scuttle on the edges. Then the edges widen. Reptiles learn to exploit patches of drier ground, where giant insects stumble. They raid egg clusters of scorpions. They ambush juvenile millipedes in zones too exposed for the big adults. Each small victory accumulates. The arthropod empire is still vast, but no longer invincible. The swamps themselves betray their old rulers. Fire, once frequent but survivable, becomes more destructive as dryness spreads. Plants adapted to damp soil find themselves brittle. Lightning strikes burn deeper and longer. What was once a patchwork of green labyrinths begins to break into mosaics of open ground and charred remnants. Arthropods adapted to shadow and humidity now face a patchier, harsher environment. Reptiles, with tougher bodies and more flexible diets, seize these new clearings. You can imagine a scene near the end of this transition, a swath of once verdant forest reduced to blackened stems after a lightning-fed firestorm. Amid the ashes, a small reptile scurries across cooling embers, its scaly feet barely scorched. It pauses to snap up a beetle weakened by the blaze. Above, no giant wings buzz, only smaller dragonflies flitting nervously. The old soundtrack of the Carboniferous, the rasp of armored legs, the drum of hawk-sized wings, begins to fade. In evolutionary time, this fade is astonishingly fast. For tens of millions of years, arthropods had been the apex, their dominance unquestioned. Then, over a few million years, atmospheric chemistry rewrites the rules, and the empire collapses. Gigantism, that signature of the age, becomes impossible. Insects and their kin do not vanish but contract, their descendants retreating into the niches we recognize today. Small, quick, peripheral. Reptiles rise to fill the vacuum. They carry their water in their skins and eggs, no longer tethered to swamps. They bask in open sun, forage in the ashes of burned-out club moss groves, dig burrows beyond the reach of fire. Their teeth and claws pierce chitin, where amphibians' soft jaws once failed. They are no longer intruders, but contenders. Even amphibians, though still tied to moisture, diversify in response to the shifting world. Some grow larger, some adopt more aquatic lifestyles, others experiment with semi-terrestrial forms. But the writing is on the wall. In a drying, cooling, less oxygenated Earth, the creatures with internal reservoirs and protective shells win. Soft bodies, tracheal diffusion, dependence on surface moisture, all these become liabilities. For the Carboniferous itself, the change is cataclysmic, but also creative. Out of the collapse of oxygen-fed monsters comes a new template for life on land, one that emphasizes internal regulation, portable resources, and resilience to fire and drought. The amphibian's half measure becomes the reptile's revolution. From this quiet shift will come lineages that lead to crocodiles, dinosaurs, mammals, and eventually us. And yet, walking in this late Carboniferous forest, you would still find terror. The giants have not disappeared entirely. Arthropleura still crawls, though thinner. Meganeura still hunts, though over smaller territories. Scorpions still raise venomous tails in the shadow of ferns. But the sense of inevitability has changed. There are cracks in the empire. Predators hesitate. Prey pushes back. The balance has tilted just enough that a new future can slip through. Above, the sky filters a cooler light. The once endless green canopy shows patches of open space. The ground under your feet feels firmer, less like a saturated sponge, more like soil. Fire scars mark the trunks, and new plant species sprout in their wake, hardier, more resistant, pioneers for a new landscape. Every detail whispers the same message. This age of excess is closing. If you pause, you can almost hear the fading chorus. The deep mechanical buzz of giant wings becomes a muted hum. The rasp of 100 legs dulls to a faint scratch. Even the smell shifts from wet rot to dry earth. The Carboniferous is not gone yet, but its nightmare quality is dimming. The monsters are still real, but no longer eternal. For the creatures living through it, there is no prophecy, only experience. But for us, looking back, the pattern is clear. Atmosphere dictates anatomy, and when atmosphere changes, the living world rewrites itself. This was as true 300 million years ago as it is today. The Carboniferous giants were not a fluke, but a function. Remove the function, and the form collapses. And as the forests retreat and the air thins, the Carboniferous yields to the next chapter, an earth where reptiles will quietly gather their strength and prepare to dominate a land finally rid of its crawling titans. Stand now in the Carboniferous twilight as it tips toward its own ending. The swamp still steams, the air still clings with moisture, but the music of the giants is quieter. This is the sound of an empire receding, a long diminuendo of claws, wings, and armored legs. In place of constant motion, there are pauses, gaps where once no empty niche existed. The same atmosphere that built this kingdom now dismantles it, molecule by molecule. For millions of years, life had obeyed a single rule here: more oxygen, more opportunity. Insects and their kin stretched their bodies outward, pushing tracheal tubes and exoskeletons to improbable extremes. Plants built towers of spore-bearing stems. Amphibians ventured out from water's edge, trying to find space between the moving walls of chitin. All of it, every strand of this ecosystem, was held up by a chemical scaffolding in the sky. When that scaffolding weakens, the structure it supported trembles. The visual shift is striking. Forests that once looked like living cathedrals of club moss and fern collapse into fragmented groves. Pools shrink into isolated basins. Fire scars stretch across what had been perpetual wetland. Insects shrink not only in size, but in aura. Their movement is no longer a slow inevitability, but a skittish darting. The giant centipede's scrape no longer echoes like a warning drum, but like dry sticks over stone. In this new mosaic of land and swamp, reptiles edge forward. Their claws leave tracks where once only soft-bodied amphibians dared crawl. They bask on the blackened trunks left by firestorms, absorbing warmth and scanning for movement. Their scales seal water inside their bodies. Their eggs hide life from desiccation. They are, for the first time, truly terrestrial animals. Not visitors, but residents. With each passing generation, they tighten their grip on this changing world. Amphibians retreat back toward wetter refuges, clinging to the last saturated pockets where their skins can stay moist. Many vanish entirely. Others shrink in range and in body, finding safety in specialization. But the old dynamic, amphibians as pioneers, arthropods as rulers, has inverted. Now reptiles take the role of expansion, and arthropods the role of retreat. Yet even in its dying days, the Carboniferous still holds power. Giant dragonflies patrol isolated channels. Scorpions hunt at the base of fallen club mosses. Spiders string webs across open corridors left by fire, adapting old weapons to new terrain. The predators have lost their monopoly, but not their mastery. A reptile that moves carelessly still risks being snatched, stung, or poisoned. This is no clean handover. It is a grinding, overlapping shift. Above, the sky grows clearer. The haze that once made the light greenish now thins, revealing sharper blue. Days feel less like a steam bath and more like a furnace under intermittent clouds. Nights cool more deeply. This change alters everything: breeding cycles, food chains, predator patterns. Where the old forest had been a continuous living wall, new landscapes of patchwork swamps and drier uplands emerge, forming the earliest templates of modern ecosystems. We can imagine one such upland, a stretch of charred soil dotted with young conifers. A small reptile, barely larger than a modern lizard, creeps along, its head tilting to catch vibrations. Ahead, a dragonfly lands on a low branch, its wings shimmering but noticeably smaller than its ancestors. The reptile darts forward, jaws snapping, and in that instant a pattern millions of years in the making tips. Predator becomes prey, arthropod becomes meal. It is a small act, but a seismic symbol. The first true transfer of dominance on land. The arms race does not stop, it only shifts focus. Reptiles develop sharper teeth, more powerful limb muscles, and more complex lungs. Arthropods develop better camouflage, faster life cycles, and new chemical defenses. Plants, once soft and water-bound, evolve seeds that can survive drought and fire. The entire web reorganizes under new atmospheric rules. Those who cannot change vanish into the fossil record. Those who can become the ancestors of future worlds. Fire remains a constant drumbeat in this transformation. with less moisture but still significant oxygen. Wildfires carve corridors through the forests, opening paths where reptiles can roam and arthropods can no longer find cover. Charcoal deposits from this time show cycles of burn and regrowth, a metronome of destruction and opportunity. In this fire-edged world, agility, internal reserves, and mobility beat armor and gigantism. The sensory texture of the Carboniferous also changes. Where once the air vibrated with heavy wing beats and the rasp of countless legs, now there is more silence, broken by occasional chirps, croaks, and reptilian hisses. This new soundscape tells its own story. The age of monsters is fading, and a more familiar vertebrate-dominated chorus is beginning to rise. From a scientific perspective, this transition is as important as the rise of dinosaurs later on. It represents the first time vertebrates fully seized control of terrestrial ecosystems. The blueprint of terrestrial life we recognize: reptiles on dry land, insects scaled to a supportable size, forests broken into distinct biomes. All begins here, in the twilight of the Carboniferous. This is the hinge point, the pivot between a world defined by oxygen-fed arthropods and a world defined by self-contained vertebrates. And yet the memory of the monster age persists. The unease humans feel around insects, the shiver at a centipede, the automatic flinch at a buzzing wing, may be the evolutionary echo of this long struggle. For hundreds of millions of years, vertebrate ancestors lived as prey under the jointed feet and compound eyes of giants. Fear was adaptive. Hesitation saved lives. Over time, those reflexes became built-in warnings, long after the giants were gone. This is why, even as the Carboniferous vanishes, its imprint remains. The new reptiles carry forward the lessons learned in shadow and swamp. The old arthropods leave behind their design philosophies: armor, jointed legs, chemical weapons, miniaturized but enduring. The plants leave coal seams under our feet, literal fossils of their excess photosynthesis. The atmosphere leaves a cautionary tale about chemistry's power over biology. As you stand in this receding age, you can sense both the end and the seed of the next beginning. The forests may fall silent, but new life waits at the edge of every clearing. The giants may shrink, but their DNA, their strategies, their blueprints will echo in future species. This is not just extinction, but transformation. Not just collapse, but recalibration. The Carboniferous began as a place where air itself grew monsters. It ends as a place where those monsters teach survival to their replacements. The torch passes, not in a single moment, but across countless breaths, each one slightly less oxygen-rich than the last. And as it passes, the world prepares for a new act: the age of reptiles, then the age of dinosaurs, then mammals, and beyond. Step forward into the late Carboniferous, and it feels like a world caught between two pulses: the echo of a dying age and the heartbeat of something new. Everywhere the signs of transition blaze. Forests that once seemed endless now form islands separated by open tracts. Swamps retreat into hollows where moisture lingers. Firestorms burn longer and hotter, carving black scars across continents. And yet within these scars lie the conditions for the future. The atmosphere itself has shifted from its earlier supercharged state. Oxygen still runs higher than modern levels, but no longer fuels the unchecked gigantism of arthropods. The giant insects and millipedes shrink generation by generation, forced by physics and biology into more modest frames. Their once imperious presence diminishes like the last towers of a collapsing citadel, where an 8-foot millipede once coiled through underbrush. Now a 4-foot version struggles to complete its molting cycle. where a dragonfly once glided with hawk-wide wings, now a smaller descendant flutters between ferns. In contrast, the reptiles arrive as if sculpted for this changing stage. Their eggs carry self-contained oceans. Their skins are armored against dryness. Their bodies regulate moisture and temperature with an independence amphibians cannot match. They expand steadily, like water filling cracks in rock, moving into drier uplands, colonizing open corridors left by fires, and hunting in niches previously too risky. Each successful clutch of eggs in a new territory marks another inch of reptilian conquest. Imagine a dawn in this transforming world. The air is cool for the first time in 1,000 nights. Mist drifts low across a burned clearing. In the distance, a giant scorpion claws at charred bark, weakened and sluggish, while a trio of small reptiles skitters past, their eyes bright, their claws deft. They pause to snap up beetles among the ash. The scorpion tries to strike, but its reflexes lag. In that moment, millions of years of dominance flicker out like a spark in damp tinder. Plants also pivot under the new regime. Instead of towering club mosses alone, conifer-like trees begin to rise, hardier, seed-bearing, less dependent on waterlogged soils. Seeds, unlike spores, can travel farther and wait longer. They tolerate fire and drought. They create drier microclimates where reptiles thrive and arthropods falter. The architecture of the land shifts from one of swampy labyrinths to one of patchwork forests and open clearings. Each shift stacks the deck a little more in favor of vertebrates. Yet the old predators do not vanish without spectacle. Spiders still string webs across open ground, glistening in the pale sun. Their venom is as potent as ever, their patience unbroken. In the air, smaller but still formidable dragonflies patrol the margins of streams. Amphibians, clinging to their refuges, still risk a swift and brutal end if they venture too far. This overlapping period, where giants shrink but still bite, where reptiles rise but still die in webs, creates an ecological tension unlike any other. Fire remains the final arbiter. With drying climates, its frequency spikes. It clears vast tracts of vegetation, concentrates prey in narrow corridors, and drives evolution by catastrophe. Animals that can outrun, outweight, or outadapt the flames survive. Those bound to moisture and mass perish. Every conflagration is an experiment, testing who belongs to the future. The sensory world mirrors this upheaval. Where once the soundscape was a dense thrum of wings and scraping legs, now it's punctuated by new noises. The rustle of scaly bodies in dry leaf litter, the hiss of reptiles warming at dawn, the crack of seed pods splitting under sun. Arthropod sounds become thinner, higher, less dominant. The fear they once commanded begins to invert, no longer automatic panic, but wary calculation. A reptile sees a scorpion and thinks, "Can I eat it?" Consider one small reptile crouched at the edge of a shrinking pond. Its nostrils flare as it watches a spider haul an amphibian into a silk-wrapped cocoon. The reptile lunges not to save, but to steal, seizing both prey and predator in its jaws. Such boldness would have been suicide millions of years earlier. Now it is strategy. This is how new apex species are born, not in a vacuum, but by exploiting the vulnerabilities of yesterday's rulers. The climate shift also transforms reproduction. Amphibians tied to water see their breeding sites vanish. Many cannot adjust. Reptiles, freed from this dependency, spread their eggs into new terrain, increasing genetic exchange and accelerating adaptation. Populations once isolated in swamps now roam uplands, mixing, diversifying. Evolution speeds up under pressure, sculpting new forms in fewer generations. Above all, the decline of gigantism removes a psychological barrier. For the first vertebrates, arthropods had been like living walls, too large, too armored, too omnipresent. As they shrink, the landscape opens. Paths once blocked by monstrous legs become corridors. Shadows once filled with wings become shafts of light. Fear recedes just enough for exploration. This freedom, even more than any single trait, gives reptiles their edge. Opportunity expands as terror contracts. Even the geologic record captures the shift. Coal seams mark the burial of swamp forests. Charcoal bands mark the wildfires. Fossil tracks shrink in parallel. Giant arthropod footprints fading to smaller prints, while reptile tracks spread wider. The planet itself is writing a before and after story across its strata. From a human vantage point, this story is a mirror. We too live in an age when atmospheric chemistry shifts faster than species can adjust. Carbon accumulates in the sky instead of being buried. Fires rage with new intensity. Ecosystems fragment. The Carboniferous warns that no rain is permanent, no balance immune to chemistry. It also shows how new winners emerge from old crises, but at a cost of immense extinction. Standing in the Carboniferous as it tips into the Permian, you would sense the end of an epoch. The air still hums, but at a higher pitch. The undergrowth still moves, but with fewer giants. The sky still glows, but with drier light. Reptiles, small but resolute, now form the vanguard of a new ecological order. They will not stay small forever. They will scale upward, diversify, and write the next great chapter of terrestrial life. The arthropods remain, of course, but their age of monstrous dominance is over. They will continue in miniature, hiding in soil and leaf litter, surviving in niches rather than commanding the stage. Their descendants will still crawl under our homes, buzz past our ears, and weave webs in corners. Faint reminders of the time when they ruled entire continents. We recoil instinctively because our deep past remembers. The Carboniferous taught life that atmosphere is destiny. It taught vertebrates to carry water inside themselves. It taught arthropods the price of over-reliance on external conditions. It taught plants the power of seeds and fire. These lessons will echo through every later age. They echo even now. Close your eyes and let the Carboniferous return, not as pictures, but as sound. Before the forest reveals its forms, its soundtrack arrives first, a layered chorus that never rests. High above, a slow mechanical hum rolls in arcs as giant dragonflies patrol like sentries. Closer, a granular hiss moves along trunks and roots, 100 articulated legs dragging across damp bark in unison. Between these two, the brittle click of pincers opens and closes with the finality of a lock engaging. The world is busy, but it is not bustle. It is hunting. Every note in the soundscape correlates to appetite. Silence, in this age, is not mercy. Silence is a countdown. In the Carboniferous, living things learned to fear absence as much as presence. When the canopy falls quiet, something larger is positioning itself. Amphibians freeze half-submerged, lungs halted in the water's cool grasp. Spiders tense in the center of their webs. Even the giant millipede slows, reading the air through thin hairs along its segments. Fear here is not a story embellishment. It is a physiological mode written into bodies by repetition. Detect, decode, decide. Shift senses now from sound to touch. The ground is a saturated mattress of centuries. Each footfall sinks and rebounds, telegraphing ripples of force through the peat, so that creatures feel your approach long before they see you. Vibration becomes a language. A stuttered series of pulses announces a small animal scrambling. A long, even wave suggests something heavy, moving with confidence. Predators read these signatures with exquisite precision, triangulating dinner the way a blind musician locates a drum. Vision fails often in this world. Light is filtered, green-brown and particulate. Safe sightlines are rare, thin tunnels punched through fronds and horsetails. The result is intimacy. Threat is not a distant silhouette striding across an open plain, but a nearness that resolves too late. The sudden bowstring-tight flash of silk across your face. The shadow that detaches from a trunk and becomes a scorpion, raising its tail. The blur of glassy wings that turns into spines clamping you in midair. Fear of proximity, of things that arrive from inches away, is one of the Carboniferous lasting gifts to vertebrate memory. And yet, for all this sensory theater, the most convincing proof of the age's reality sleeps in stone. The Carboniferous did not merely happen, it left receipts. In coal country, split slate exposes dragonfly wings the size of a hawk's spread, veined like stained glass windows. Their geometry is not guessed, it is preserved, each vein a fossilized line in a blueprint for predation. Elsewhere, trackways record the transit of Arthropleura across damp mud, parallel arrays of oval impressions with a central drag mark where the segmented belly brushed the ground. In some beds, the stride length changes mid-track, as if the animal accelerated, and a spray of smaller prints veers away, a chase captured forever in negative. There is charcoal, too, vast seams of ancient ash that testify to fires which burned in atmospheres far friendlier to flame than our own. Microscopic analysis of these black layers reveals plant cells vitrified by heat, indicating wildfires hot enough to turn wet tissues into glass. Those layers reappear rhythmically in the rock record, burn, regrow, burn again, as if lightning itself had kept a metronome across continents. Between charcoal bands, one finds the slow work of swamps, compressed mats of fern and club moss that become coal, the Earth's ledger entries for photosynthesis on a scale we struggle to imagine. From the same strata come more intimate clues. Spider spinnerets preserve as tiny cones the nozzles of ancient silk machinery. Scorpion stings fossilize as recurved spears with channels for venom. The jaws of early amphibians hold the faint serrations of teeth adapted to slippery prey. Even the respiratory story of insects survives by proxy. The cross-sectional scaling of their tracheal tubes, inferred from body proportions locked in shale. None of these pieces alone explains the Carboniferous alarms. Together, they form a dossier so complete that the mind cannot help but reconstruct the noise, the humidity, the constant stalking pressure. Imagine an excavation trench at dawn. Pale shales lie open under dew. A field worker lifts a wafer of rock, and an impression flashes. A dragonfly forewing, its margin perfect. The fossil hums quietly in the brain, despite its silence. Those veins imply lift, and lift implies pursuit. A meter away, someone clears a surface of ancient mud, and a procession of millipede footprints emerges, offset like the tread of a conveyor belt. A few slabs down, a web-shaped pattern of carbon threads a dark circle, the ghost of silk printed by fire. It is hard, standing over such evidence, not to feel the age breathe up through the rock. Return for a moment to the question our own bodies keep asking when a fly strafes our ear or a spider dashes along the baseboard. Why do we react so quickly, so disproportionately, to such small things? Evolutionary psychology's answer is blunt, because for a very long time, they were not small, and even when they were smaller, they were still common, venomous, and near. The Carboniferous made skittishness adaptive. Vertebrate nervous systems that hesitated produced fewer descendants. The hair trigger survived. That inheritance reaches even into our perceptual biases. We are good at detecting discontinuous motion at the edges of vision, exactly the sort of motion an arthropod produces, with jointed legs and stop-start gaits. We overweigh buzzing tones in our auditory cortex. We dislike unseen touch on the skin. None of these quirks is arbitrary. They are the echoes of selection pressures from a world where hesitation was fatal and where the predator's advantage was closeness, not grandeur. Could a modern human endure there? The thought experiment collapses under its own arithmetic. Oxygen at 30+% floods tissue with reactive molecules. Lungs inflammate. The nervous system misfires. Humidity undermines thermoregulation. The ground sabotages locomotion. Predators do not form a single hierarchy to be managed with vigilance, but a mesh that saturates space. Airstrikes, silk snares, ground ambushes. Our only plausible refuge would be the same one early amphibians chose: water. And even then, survival would be a timetable, not a guarantee. And still the world changed. The atmospheric scaffolding loosened, fires re-scripted the forests, and the arthropod empire thinned. The fossils mark this inflection too. Wingspans contract through time slices. Trackways of giant millipedes fade from thick gouges to faint rows before vanishing altogether. Charcoal bands persist, but are separated by deposits that speak of drier soils and seed-bearing plants. Layer by layer, a nightmare lightens to a harsh but survivable clarity. What follows in this story is not merely the rise of reptiles or the later spectacle of dinosaurs. It is the codification of a new rule set for life on land. Independence from ambient water becomes the winning strategy. Scales to limit loss, eggs to carry oceans inside shells, lungs subdivided for efficiency rather than simply inflated by abundance. Predation changes too, from omnipresent swarms to focused confrontations. Fear rewrites itself from constant alarm to situational caution. The animal mind, freed from saturating threat, can allocate attention differently, explore, plan, wait. Even so, the Carboniferous does not relinquish its hold on the future. Its coal fuels civilizations and climate alike. Its fires teach ecosystems to expect rhythm in catastrophe. Its arthropods, reduced in scale, retain their mastery of chemistry and architecture. Silk persists as a solution so perfect that no vertebrate rivals it. Venom stays as a language every ecosystem understands. The design space they opened remains occupied, smaller now, but no less ingenious. And the sounds, always the sounds, persist as ghosts in our imaginations. A low mechanical hum can unsettle us without context. A dry rasp along wood signals intrusion before thought has translated it into insect. A net brushed across the face in a dark room accelerates the heart as if the Carboniferous canopy had returned. The body does not need a museum label to recall the age that trained it. Stand, finally, at the edge of a shrinking Carboniferous swamp near the turning of the age. The air is cooler. The canopy is torn into windows of sky. A young reptile lifts its head and listens, not to a wall of noise, but to discrete signals it can parse. It chooses a path between charred trunks and vanishes up a slope into light. In the mud behind it, the last clear tracks of a giant arthropod dim toward nothing. The fossil will keep both stories, the retreating multitude and the advancing few, in layers we can read. We will run our fingers along those ridges and tell the tale again. There was an age when air grew monsters, when water meant strategy, when fear itself was a technology. And we will know it, not as myth, but as evidence pressed into stone, tuned to a soundtrack we still carry in our nerves. Step beyond the waning Carboniferous, and the Earth is no longer the same. Where once the world was dominated by labyrinthine swamps and towering club mosses, the ground now opens into wider plains, dotted with tougher vegetation. Fire scars are older, deeper, and more permanent. Conifers rise as the new architects of shade, replacing the fern cathedrals with spires of resin and seed. The sky seems bigger, the air thinner, the distances between trees longer. It is the birth of a new geography and a new biology to match. The reptiles, still small by future standards, take this rearranged stage as if it was always theirs. They scuttle across baked mud between intermittent streams. They claw their way into crevices opened by fire and drought. They bask on exposed rock, absorbing heat before venturing out to forage. Each behavior pushes the boundary of what land life can be. Where amphibians once had to retreat at every dry spell, reptiles now persist. They are the first to truly understand that water can be carried inside. In the margins of these open spaces, the last of the great arthropods struggle. Meganeura's descendants flutter with narrower wings, their flights shorter, their dominance waning. Arthropleura dwindles to local populations, each one thinner and more fragile. The scorpions still sting, but their scale no longer inspires awe. Evolution has written a gentle but unstoppable command across their bodies: shrink, adapt, retreat. Yet the planet does not pause. As Pangaea assembles, climates shift even more dramatically. Interior lands dry further, temperatures swing, and oxygen levels slide toward modern proportions. The great swamps of the Carboniferous become memories locked in coal seams. Seed plants spread across the continents, creating ecosystems where reptiles thrive. The very shape of predator and prey interactions changes. Less swarm and ambush, more pursuit and territory. Picture a sunlit upland at the dawn of the Permian. The ground is firm, littered with dry needles rather than sodden fronds. A small reptile with a sail-like ridge along its back stretches out to warm itself, its blood quickening with the rising sun. Around it, insects still buzz, but its scales familiar to our eyes. In the distance, another reptile snaps up a beetle and scrambles over exposed stone. This is not a world of constant threat from above and below. It is a world of zones, of separations, of niches. Amphibians cling to the last damp lowlands. Their bodies are thicker, their jaws broader, but their eyes still dart nervously to the sky. They are no longer explorers, but relicts, shadows of the first pioneers. Some lineages will persist, evolving into new forms. Many will vanish, their lineages terminating as the ground they depend on turns to dust. In this new order, fear itself recalibrates. Under the arthropod empire, danger was omnidirectional, saturating the environment. Under the reptilian order, danger becomes spatial. Territories, ambush points, predator-prey encounters with margins to negotiate. The vertebrate brain, evolved under total siege, now begins to experience something novel: intervals of safety, moments to plan, time to store memories. This shift is invisible, but profound. With time to plan comes time to innovate. With innovation comes the ability to dominate not just by numbers or armor, but by strategy. Seeds also change the tempo. Where spore forests offered constant uniform food, seed plants create seasonal pulses, bursts of nutrition, then scarcity. Animals respond by hoarding, migrating, or hibernating. Behaviors diversify. Brains adapt to cycles rather than floods. The reptilian egg, already a marvel, becomes even more valuable in a world of seasonal stress, allowing embryos to develop protected during droughts or fires. Even the fire that once ruled the Carboniferous becomes a different kind of force. Seed-bearing plants recover differently than club mosses. They resprout, spread cones, recolonize ash faster. They tolerate and even rely on periodic burning. Fire becomes not just destruction, but renewal, knitting a cycle that selects for resilience. In this cycle, reptiles excel, moving quickly into burned ground to hunt displaced prey, laying eggs in soils fertilized by ash, using charred trunks as basking platforms. This threshold between the Carboniferous and the Permian marks a second great template for terrestrial life. The first was amphibian plus arthropod in an oxygen-rich swamp. The second is reptile plus seed plant on drier land. Each template reorganizes the rules of anatomy, behavior, and survival. Each leaves a fingerprint in the fossil record. Look at that record, and you can see the transition in overlapping silhouettes. On one layer, massive arthropod tracks press deep into damp mud. On the next, lighter reptile tracks cross baked clay. Wing fossils shrink from hawk-sized dragonflies to insects you could catch in your hand. Plant fossils shift from feathered fronds to needle-like leaves. Even the chemical signatures in the rock, carbon isotopes, charcoal content, tell the same story. A planet trading one set of equilibria for another. The legacy of the Carboniferous monsters survives in miniature, but also in our deep-time imagination. Every story of dragons, of giant bugs in dark forests, of webs catching unwary travelers, is in some way a pale echo of this age. It is encoded in our reflexes and our myths. We think we invented these fears, but we inherited them. And the coal, the buried forests of this age, will one day fuel the rise of our own species, power our machines, alter our atmosphere. We will, in a strange sense, burn the Carboniferous twice, first as firestorms under high oxygen, then as industrial furnaces under human hands. Its lesson about atmosphere and life will return to test us. Standing at this threshold, you can feel both the grandeur and the humility of the story. The Earth does not belong to any one design. It lends dominance conditionally, under parameters that shift. The arthropods ruled under one set, the reptiles under another, mammals and humans under yet another. Every rain is a contract with the sky. In the fading light of the Carboniferous, a small reptile pauses on a patch of dry soil and looks back toward the swamp. Behind it, mist still curls over the water. A dragonfly rises and dips once, twice, then disappears. Ahead, conifers line a ridge under a harder sun. The reptile moves forward. The age of monsters ends not with a cataclysmic bang, but with a quiet step into new terrain. Walk now into the very last breaths of the Carboniferous as it blurs into the Permian. The swamp still clings to low ground, but its heartbeats are slow. The trees that once formed a living ceiling now stand farther apart, their shadows separated by shafts of direct sun. Conifers and seed ferns push upward where club mosses fall. Amphibians, once numerous along every bank, are huddled in fewer pockets, their skins duller, their calls quieter. Even the air smells different, less rich, less intoxicating, tinged with dryness. This is not yet the modern world, but it feels like an outline of it. For the first time since vertebrates crawled from water, the ground itself looks like territory rather than obstacle. Firm soil, open spaces, seasonal winds. These are conditions that reward endurance, planning, and internal stores. Small reptiles scurry across them with a sense of ownership. Their claws leave crisp prints in dust rather than smeared impressions in mud. Their eggs incubate on slopes, warmed by sun, rather than hidden in swamp ooze. Arthropods persist, but as shadows of their former grandeur. Where once the giant millipede Arthropleura sprawled across the forest floor like a living bridge, now smaller cousins feed discreetly in leaf litter. Dragonflies still glide, but no longer own the sky. They flit in sunbeams, more prey than predator, to the quick-mouthed reptiles darting from the underbrush. Scorpions remain patient hunters, but must choose their ambush spots carefully, as the new reptiles learn to flip and crush them. Yet for all the shrinkage, the architecture of the arthropod world survives. Silk remains, still spun in glistening spirals. Venom persists, refined to act faster in smaller doses. Exoskeletons continue to armor soft bodies. What changes is scale and context. Instead of monsters ruling a labyrinth, they are now specialists in a tapestry. Instead of saturating the environment, they punctuate it. Above this rearranged ecosystem stretches a sky subtly altered. Oxygen levels hover lower, and nitrogen dominates as it does today. Fire seasons come and go like punctuation marks. When lightning strikes, the blaze roars, but burns in mosaic patterns, leaving patches for quick colonizers. The swamps no longer knit continents into green corridors. They exist as pockets, laboratories where amphibians still cling, but reptiles now visit as predators, not refugees. Imagine standing on a rocky rise at dusk. Below lies a shallow valley where a remnant swamp glows under a setting sun. Mist rises from black water, dotted with mats of decaying plant matter. Small amphibians croak weakly, their calls swallowed by evening wind. In the trees, a much-reduced dragonfly balances on a seed fern frond. From the dry slope where you stand, a reptile about the size of a modern iguana tilts its head, watching. It descends quietly, claws gripping stone, and in one swift lunge seizes the dragonfly. The amphibians startle, but do not flee far. They are learning, too, that the monsters above have shrunk. This inversion of fear marks a turning point in the history of life. For hundreds of millions of years, arthropods were the ceiling against which vertebrates pressed, the constant presence that kept them small and cautious. Now, that ceiling has lifted. Vertebrates, by internalizing water, by carrying their own world inside, have sidestepped the atmospheric limits that bound their rivals. The arms race has turned inside out. Plants record this change as clearly as animals. Coal seams taper, and new soils appear between them. Red beds rich in iron, oxidized by a drier atmosphere. These sediments tell of seasonal floods rather than permanent swamps. Fossil pollen grains show the rise of seed-bearing plants capable of waiting out hard times. Leaf shapes change from broad fronds to narrow needles. Each adaptation signals a planet reorganizing itself. Even the insect's tracheal systems adapt, shrinking and branching differently to handle less oxygen. Those lineages that survive do so by speeding their life cycles, producing more offspring more often, slipping between the cracks of vertebrate predation. The age of insects is not over. It is simply normalized, rescaled to a background hum instead of a lead melody. With this normalization comes a psychological shift in the vertebrate nervous system. The constant hypervigilance of amphibians gives way to a more flexible attentiveness in reptiles. The brain can now invest time in activities beyond immediate survival. Territory marking, social signaling, strategic foraging. This behavioral latitude becomes a hidden engine of innovation. Where amphibians responded, reptiles anticipate. Fire remains a teacher. Every blaze opens ground for colonization. Every patch of charred soil becomes an arena for competition between old and new plant lineages. Reptiles, with their mobility and internal reserves, exploit these windows quickly, arriving at fresh shoots before amphibians or insects can regroup. Eggs buried in warm ash incubate faster. In this interplay of fire and life, a new cycle emerges that will shape terrestrial ecosystems for hundreds of millions of years. We can almost trace a direct line from this moment to ourselves. The reptilian solution, sealed skin, portable water, shelled egg, lays the foundation for mammalian amniotic development, for bird eggs, for every vertebrate fully freed from water. The transition we are watching here is not just about the end of giant bugs. It is about the liberation of land life from the constraints of its birth environment. And yet, the Carboniferous leaves more than fossils and genes. It leaves an emotional template. Even as reptiles ascend, they inherit reflexes from their amphibian ancestors. Reflexes tuned to a world of omnipresent danger. Those reflexes persist down the tree of life to mammals, to primates, to us. We still freeze at the hint of unseen movement. We still startle at the brush of something across our skin. We still treat insects with a disproportionate mix of fear and fascination. Standing at the edge of this world, you realize the Carboniferous is both alien and intimate. Alien because its air and creatures defy modern experience. Intimate because its lessons live in our nerves, our myths, and our industrial seams of black rock. The coal beneath our feet is time folded upon itself, each lump a compressed fern frond, each seam a million summers of ancient swamps. We dig it up, burn it, and in so doing release back into the sky the breath of that monster age. The last of the great arthropods fade, but the principle they proved endures. Atmosphere and life co-author each other. Change one, and you change the other. The Carboniferous demonstrated that a planet can grow monsters if the chemistry is right, and that it can shrink them too. As we alter our own atmosphere today, the lesson glows from deep time. The contract is conditional. Now the scene closes. The swamp recedes. The conifers advance. Reptiles stretch in the sun. Amphibians retreat to shrinking pools. The dragonfly takes flight, but its wings are narrow and its shadow small. The scorpion retreats under a seed fern, pincers folding tight. Overhead, no hawk-sized insects patrol. Instead, a dry wind stirs ash into spirals. The Carboniferous, once a living crucible of oxygen and excess, exhales its last humid breath and hands the land to a new order. The Carboniferous closes not with a single catastrophe, but with a slow exhalation. Forests fragment, swamps retreat, oxygen declines, and with it, the giants. The last of the colossal millipedes crawl across damp soil, as relics of a chemistry no longer theirs. Dragonflies still glide, but cast smaller shadows. Scorpions and spiders remain, but their scale no longer defines the land. Amphibians cling to scattered pools, and reptiles stride between them, carrying within their eggs the blueprint of a future that will stretch into dinosaurs, birds, mammals, and ultimately, us. This transition is one of the great hinge points in Earth's story. It marks the first true conquest of land by vertebrates, the first time internalized water defeated atmospheric abundance, the first time eggs broke the chain that tied life to ponds and streams. It also marks the end of an age when the very air could grow monsters, an age whose lessons remain etched into stone, genes, and instinct. Look back across the chapters of this journey. The towering club mosses, the endless humid swamps, the millipedes and scorpions moving like armored trains, the dragonflies with hawk-wide wings patrolling above. Remember how water became sanctuary, fire became judge, and oxygen became both gift and curse. Remember how reptiles, small and cautious, tested the ground until they could claim it. All of these images form a living tapestry of our planet's experimental years. The time when land was still an unshaped frontier, and now the curtain falls. The Carboniferous recedes into deep time, its coal seams buried, its monsters fossilized, its atmosphere normalized. But its echoes live on in our nervous system, our myths, and our energy. Every flinch at an insect, every shiver at a spider's silk, every lump of coal we burn carries a whisper of this lost world. To know the Carboniferous is to know a part of ourselves, the part that once crouched at the water's edge, listening for the scrape of unseen legs. As we leave this age behind, take with you the awe it inspires and the caution it demands. Atmosphere shapes life, and life reshapes atmosphere. The contract is never permanent. The past is not a museum, but a mirror. When you step back into your own world and hear the faint buzz of a fly, or see the glint of a web in sunlight, remember the age when such things ruled unopposed. Thank you for traveling with us through this deep chapter of Earth's history. Until next time, stay curious, stay reflective, and carry the memory of this alien yet intimate world. This has been Journey Through Time, inviting you to step across eras and see the stories written in stone, air, and instinct.